This is David with No Chaser, and today I want to talk about the myth and misconceptions surrounding the idea of hitting rock bottom. The first one, they kind of break off into two separate avenues. The first one is just the idea of rock bottom itself in an alcoholic's and addict's life. And the second one is the idea of rock bottom and it being a necessity in your recovery. So for the first one, rock bottom is so ubiquitous of an idea that people outside of any circles regarding addiction or recovery know what it means. For some people, the idea of hitting rock bottom can be something different, but it's usually when you've been on some sort of journey of some sort, some struggle, and you hit a low point, which is pretty apt for almost all alcoholics and addicts out there. And this may be strange to kind of challenge this notion, but I think it's important, and so I want to kind of lay the case out. So people think of rock bottom as their world has come crashing down. And finally the everything they were doing came to this end point, and the chickens came home to roost, or whatever you want to call it. The consequences have all come there, and this was when your life finally just crashed. And that idea, I think it negates a little bit about what your life was like right before those consequences. Because the thing is that I think rock bottom is a state of living. I don't think of it as an event. So for me, I've had just about every type of template of rock bottom, whether it was getting arrested and getting in legal trouble, whether it was destroying a relationship, whether it was losing a job, whether it was almost dying, all those type of things. And I consider that was like, no, this is when my life fell apart. But the truth is, my life was already apart. The thing is, those consequences weren't my world coming crashing down. Those consequences and those events only revealed what my world actually was. I was already in rock bottom. If you're waking up every morning and you hate who you see in the mirror, if you go through times so dark that you actually really start considering the concept and possibility of committing suicide, if you just loathe yourself and all you know is shame and you don't think anything will get better in your life and you think you're worthless, you don't need a DUI for it to be rock bottom. You don't need to be left or to be divorced or to lose your kids or anything for that to be rock bottom. Where your life is, what it has come to, and the way you have changed for the worse, that can be rock bottom. The habits and the behaviors that you never thought you'd partake in, all the promises you broke, all the lines that you swore you'd never cross and you did, how your moral compass is just completely broken, that's rock bottom. And you don't need an arrest for it. You don't need divorce papers. You don't need a hospital bill or an emergency room visit or an attempted suicide for it to be a rock bottom. Your life is already there. And while it may seem strange to point this out, I think it's important to recognize, because I want to break it into the second part of a misconception regarding rock bottom. And that is that there is this kind of template of someone's journey into recovery where you kind of had to be a phoenix that rose from the ashes. You had to have this horrible point that was the last time you drank or the last time you used, and you'll never forget it because it was the worst thing in your entire life. It was your biggest low point, but from there you moved on up, right? That's kind of what most people, outside of recovery think of an alcoholic's or an addict's, journey to redemption. You always have to start from the complete bottom. Now, in my sort of journey, or whatever you want to call it, I had horrible, horrible low points. Probably one of the worst was when I nearly died from an attempted suicide. And I've had all the other ones. You can name all the ones that every other alcoholic and addict has probably faced or will face or, is in the risk of facing. The loss of friends, or, even those big moments of like getting caught on the job drinking or using and being fired and embarrassed, or going to jail and then losing your job because you're in jail, and then losing your kids because you went to jail, or that whole type of thing. I've had those moments, and I was a chronic relapser. I thought so many times, whether I was sitting in jail or sitting in a hospital bed, this is it. this is the worst moment, and I can only, like, I can't live like this anymore. The only way is up from here. And yet I still drank after that. And the thing is that my last time that I drank, it wasn't that awful. I mean, it was totally awful, the relapse and the feelings I had and everything like that. But I mean, I didn't have this big crashing down moment. I had no sort of like external horrible things that happened. I mean, it was bad enough of relapsing and knowing how like dark of a place I was going to get. And my relapse was only 4 days, but I didn't destroy my world. And it's kind of funny to me because of all the crazy and awful things that had happened, I always thought of it in my head. I was like, well, it's weird that my story, you know, you'd think it would end on a different note, and I would begin anew from that horrible, awful place. Like, in all reality, I didn't really lose anything the last time I drank. I was definitely going to. I mean, I was already, after 4 days of drinking, I was already thinking about killing myself and everything. But in all intents and purposes of people looking on the outside, you know, people at work, I just took a couple days off. You wouldn't even notice anything happened to me. I didn't get any legal trouble. I didn't like have any giant breakup or kicked out or then became homeless again or anything like that. I just had relapse and I picked it back up. And it's very strange. There was these thoughts that as I started piling more days and then a couple of weeks, I really thought, and maybe I'm just crazy on this, but I really thought of like, is this how my story's going to be? That the last time I drank, usually people have like just a crazy or tremendously like bleak, crazy bottom point that they started from. Mine, I mean, compared to a lot of the others, which they were bad enough, and God knows I would not want to face them again, it wasn't that bad. That's silly. It's silly to think of yourself as a story in that sense. It is pointless to think that you need a rock bottom to get better. You know, one of the things is that I always thought, why did I have to have all these horrible things happen to finally have to get better or to know I was in the situation I was in? Like, even worse, why did I have to hurt so many people in order to really try and search for recovery? The point is that, well, if you're an alcoholic and an addict, that's kind of the idea, right? Like, if you could just stop when bad things happened, then you wouldn't be what you are. But the idea at a certain point, if you're like me where you've had these things happen and you still drank or used after them, or you were only able to put together a few months and then you went back out, if the last time you've gone out wasn't that awful in comparison to other points you've been in your life, it doesn't need to be. You can just start from there, because you don't have to follow some sort of story. Your journey doesn't have to be this like narrative that you see in movies or TVs, or that you even hear from other people. It doesn't need to fit any sort of mold. It doesn't have to be a certain way. You just move forward and get better. And you know, it can sound stupid and preachy to be like, you know, you don't need bad things to happen to you to get better. Well, I mean, I'm not saying that, because that's clearly ridiculous. I mean, you technically don't need bad things to happen, but that's kind of the whole point of this affliction. We keep doing what we're doing despite of all the consequences. But what I mean is, if you've been struggling for a while and you've hit real low points and you happen to have relapsed again, you don't need to go further. You don't need to wait for something to stop you. You don't have to be a train that's moving and you can't turn left or right. You just have to run right off the cliff. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think if someone had told me this during my drinking days when I was really struggling and I kept getting sober and relapsing, I would have just been like, dude, I don't really choose to relapse anyways. I mean, I guess I do, but in the sense of like, I'm not like waiting for something to happen to me. I just can't quit drinking, or I just can't quit using. You know, with even that being said, I still, like I said, after like weeks and months went by, I still started thinking in this way of like, is this the end of it? Like, the end of it was just those kind of random 4 days, you know. was that all I needed, or was that enough? Like, do I have to face something worse before I'll actually truly commit to long-term sobriety or get better? And it's like, no. No, you just go from the day you're at and you keep moving. I mean, if you've been suffering from alcoholism or addiction, you've probably had enough bad things to happen for you. Like I said, this doesn't have to be some movie-esque story that you can tell people or you can share with others. It doesn't have to be the phoenix from the ashes. You can heal whenever you want to. And again, you can keep moving forward. You don't have to wait for the bottom to hit before you get better. And like I said, going back to my original point, that when the horrible milestones, I guess I weirdly call it, when those horrible things had happened, where like the big external things of the divorce, arrest, losing the kids, losing the job, losing the house, all that type of stuff, those necessarily weren't when your life was crashing down. Where you were at and what your addiction and what alcohol had turned you into, you were already in a state of rock bottom. And you don't need to run into something. You don't need to crash to rise. You can start over whenever you want and just keep moving forward. You don't have to fit a story. You're your own story. Hey, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content and are interested in hearing more. I'll be producing a lot more videos covering a wide range of topics. And I also have an email I'm going to list below if you have any personal questions or comments or ideas for topics or just something about your experience. I love any sort of feedback like that. And if you have just general stuff too, just put it in the comments below. Thanks.